Invincible has been one of my favorite shows of the past couple years. It is a refreshing take on superheroes while subverting how the whole teen coming of age stories go by adding a layer of realism and drama that honestly we would see in our own real world today. Because if we had superheroes running around, there'd be a lot of political drama, and especially if we had aliens coming down here, there would be a lot of political drama there. But since season 4 has dropped, specifically episode 2, I've been looking at Nolan in a much different light than I have before. Because we all know that at some point he was going to be redeemed, whether you've just been watching the show or you've already read the comics. This is common knowledge by this point. But the look into his past that we experienced in season 4 episode 2 has not only strengthened his redemption arc for me, but also gives you some justification of why he is the way he is. And honestly, while the Viltrumite Empire itself is a scourge on the galaxy itself, it puts them in a new, more tragic perspective for me. Because I think that I finally truly grasp what Invincible is about, which is a question that people kind of, ask from time to time. And it's experiencing and overcoming trauma. So to back up this claim in today's video, I want to provide evidence and examples by looking at the show through Nolan's life to see how what he experienced on Earth is corrected through his time spent there. So with all this out the way, I do want to say thank you guys again so much for the support. I really appreciate it. Please continue liking, commenting, subscribing. But with all that out the way, let's get it done. So season 4 episode 2 opens up by showing us the earliest moments of Nolan's life that we have experienced up until this point, where we see how the Scourge virus has ravaged the Viltrumite Empire eventually. But at the beginning of the episode, we see how young Viltrumites are not only educated but also punished through the eyes of Nolan. While speaking about the history of Emperor Argal, he asks the class a question, and while the little girl, whose turn it is to answer, takes time to think, he threatens her with the idea of death, which honestly isn't even a threat. It's a promise he intends to keep if she can't answer the question in general, and not just not answer the question, but answer it correctly, right? It is then finished off by him telling them to look for food and shelter that night because they're going to fight each other the next day, and at least 2 of them will die. Again, he's speaking to children who at this point couldn't be older than the age of 10. And this is relevant because it gives us a look at how Nolan's childhood was, Imagine your main motivator is to not just strive for excellence, but if you get a singular question wrong, your life in general is over, right? This is indoctrination since literal birth, and we can also see that young Viltrumites aren't even nurtured by their parents, likely after they get the necessary nutrients they need, meaning that the second they can walk or speak for themselves, they're sent out on their own. And honestly, I wouldn't even be surprised if they have them in centers where they just feed them through tubes and only teach them the basics of surviving, I guess. But one thing I can say we at least know for sure is that they at least know who their parents are. Not like the reason they know them is much better anyways, because we are shown that once a Viltrumite comes of age on their birthday, they have to survive ritual combat with their parents. Keep in mind that a Viltrumite only gets stronger with age, so one that's like 5,000 years old beating on one in their late teens to early 20s is a crazy concept because they're nowhere close in strength. Now imagine that 2 of those are beating on you at the same time. This is what happens at your Viltrumite coming of age ceremony, right? They have been conditioned so much that they have no real love for each other. All they care about is how loyal and beneficial you are to the Viltrumite Empire at large. That's the entire point of this fight. It's not to prepare you for the things that you may see out there. It's to see if you're even worthy of going out into the universe to conquer it in the name of the Viltrumite Empire. And looking at this, it's easy to see why Nolan was the man he was by the time we see him in season 1. Living on Earth with Debbie was very much a conflicting time for him. He was experiencing love for the first time, whether he wanted to admit it or not. Then came along Mark, which one scene that I like to think about is the baseball game scene when he was younger. Nolan distances himself from the crowd, right? He thinks he's above it. So much so that when he's asked by Debbie why he's standing by himself, he says that he would rather be flying up because he'd have a much better view. And this could be taken as some form of commentary on how he looks down on humanity at this time, right? And how he sees them as lesser and it's always, if you're above somebody, it's seen as a form of dominance in a way. But Debbie speaks to him about how important connecting and cheering on those you love is. But by the time at the end of this speech, we finally see his walls start to come down. This is our first real indicator that the conditioning that Nolan went through over the course of 2,000 years was being broken. Because by the end of this scene, we have a moment of Nolan lifting Mark and genuinely seeing something outside of the Viltrumite Empire as having value, even if he himself at the time wouldn't admit it. This moment is so significant because it connects to the one at the end of season 1. So let's get to Mark and Nolan and how that helped in breaking his cycle even further. So the fight between Omni-Man and Mark is probably one of the most iconic ones of the 2020s in Western adult animation by this point, if not Western animation in general. Now, whether that is for better or worse, because how we speak about Invincible's animation, you know, myself included, I can't give you that answer. But I will tell you that the weight and the gravity of the fight does land. It does what it needs to do, because it's not just shock value for shock value's sake. It seeks to further the story. You know, two godlike beings fight across the country, one trying to defend his home planet from his father, tyrannical father at this point, the other doing what he believes is right due to the conditioning from his people that he's experienced over the past 2,000 years, were all just space Nazis. You know, the Viltrumite Empire is just space Nazis, and Thrag is just space Hitler. I don't know if you picked up on that yet. The mustaches kind of should have gave that away a little bit, outside of their actions and the things that they do. But this is important because, as we saw in episode 2 of season 4, this is just something that happens as Viltrumites come of age. They're gonna square up with their you know, father and or mother or both. And at the time, we didn't know this because it wasn't a part of the original source material. Now, whether or not Kirkman intended for it to be by the end of season 1, we don't know. We just don't. But it's such a great addition to the story because it lays the groundwork for what happens in the Viltrumite Empire during later stages of the story that I will not be spoiling. But the important takeaway from this is that he sees nothing wrong with it. Sure, Nolan's trying to force Mark to accept his destiny of joining the Viltrumite Empire, but this is just a regular part of the culture to him. He's testing to see if Mark is ready for the larger world he's about to enter, and Nolan even asks him when, you know, Mark is resisting, of course, what will you have when the Earth and everyone you know and love is dead and gone over the course of the next 1,000 years? And Mark says, I'd have you even after 1,000 years, which is the final nail in the coffin that triggers his crisis, and he begins to go through a metamorphosis and change, because Nolan abandons his station on Earth, which, as we've heard in season 2, is something that the Viltrumite Empire never thought would happen. The guy with the monocle or the eye patch kind of thingy, he's like, you've been such a loyal soldier over the course of the past 2,000 years, and what could have happened on Earth for you to abandon your station? But he's also so broken to the point where he seemingly tries to kill himself by going into a black hole. And how he escapes, we don't know, but eventually he does end up on a planet where he does have Oliver, and he invites Mark to try and make amends with him. But the thing is, he doesn't even know that he's done something wrong when Mark shows up and sees his new family. He also makes it seem as if, again, nothing is wrong between the both of them, because again, something like beating your kid to a pulp is just a regular thing that happens in the Viltrumite Empire and in the Viltrumite culture, apparently. Right? And we also learn at this point that Debbie wasn't the first mate that Nolan had throughout his travels, because while he was trying to get rid of anything that could pose a threat to the Empire, he was tasked with finding a species compatible with Viltrumite DNA. So outside of what occurred between Nolan and Mark on Earth, leaving his station was, you know, leaving after doing what he needed to do wasn't that much out of the ordinary for him. But we see how this time on Earth has impacted him, so much so that his real reason for calling Mark there is to help him protect Oliver and the Thraxans from the Viltrumites that are obviously searching for him. As, you know, he not only abandoned his post, but he had a child with an inferior race to the Viltrumites, right? And this shows that, again, his history has really started to affect him, that he's willing to care for something outside of himself. Not only that, but something that he would have seen and deemed as disgusting not even 20 or 30 years later. Compared to his 2,000 years of living is nothing, because 20 to 30 years of 2,000, I don't know about you, but that shit, that's crazy. That's like 1 year out of your 80 if the time dilation and math, I didn't do it right. But it leads up to this big moment at the end of season 2 where Nolan says the iconic line, I think I miss my wife. But the thing is, all that growing that he's been going through over the course of that season 2 was important, and it led up to these things because it shows that Nolan's finally accepting the love that he's been experiencing not his entire life, but the entirety of Mark's life. We'll give it there because I don't know how long him and Debbie were together, but the entirety of Mark's life, and eventually his friendship with Alan and helping the coalition to gather things to fight the Empire, which again, Nolan 30 years ago would have just killed Alan straight up. He wouldn't have even thought a second chance to be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna help you gather the weapons to kill my people, you know, and help you stop them. But Invincible has always been a show about overcoming trauma from the very beginning, and while Mark is our main character and the one we see who goes through the most trials and tribulations, Nolan Grayson to me is a stellar example of character growth. He's honestly the most interesting character in the show to me at this point because he has every reason to be stuck in his ways, right? He lived a heartless and honestly solitary life for the last 2,000 years with conditioning that we are seeing being broken in real time. It's honestly just a treat to watch. And it's an example that no matter where you come from or what you were taught, you can still change and make up for the things that you've done in the past, you know? Because again, I'm gonna just put this out there. This is showing you that there's no excuse for racism. You can learn and change, but you know, it's the willingness to want to do it. Because while things you may have done in the past may not be forgiven, you can still choose a different path to become a better person. But that's the video, you know, and I really hope you guys enjoyed it, and let me know down below what you think. Have you been enjoying Invincible season 4 so far? You know, leave a comment, a like, and if you enjoyed, please consider subscribing. I really do appreciate it, and we're going crazy this year. You know, I love you guys, but I will see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.